All right, so the second video here for socialization is going to look at some of the theories that help us further understand the learning process of that is socialization, and remembering that socialization is the learning of the culture and all aspects of the culture, but also the learning that then informs who we develop as an individual, a unique individual within society, because we're a mix of both our society and our own sense of self here. Now, for this part here, we actually do we dip a little bit into psychology here, and that's okay. There's the room. Sociology and psychology can live together quite nicely, and but because socialization process is a learning process, psychologists have that figured out because they look at the learning and the brain and all that sort of stuff. So we need some of this information here. And but these theories, we actually could call them social psychological theories, because it's not just looking at any one individual and their psychology, that individuals living within a particular social structure. So sociologists acknowledge the contribution of psychoanalytic and psychological explanation, but sociologists focus more on how people develop an awareness of self and how they learn about the culture in which they live. We cannot form a sense of self or personal identity without social contact with others. So that's why sociology is at the table. Our self-concept, even though that's individual, it therefore, is a totality of our beliefs and feelings about ourselves, but it also is a social self, because if we didn't live as a social being, that self-concept would be meaningless. So your social self, your self-concept, or your personality is your perception about what kind of person you are. Some sociologists believe that you do not know who you are until you see yourself as you believe others see you. Therefore, you gain information about yourself through interaction with others. You interpret and evaluate the messages you get from other people, and those become central to the social construction of your own unique identity. So these social psychological theories therefore help us explain how we learn the rules, the culture, how we come to internalize them, and how our identities are formed and developed. So we're going to start with Sigmund Freud and his psychoanalytic perspective. Now, I'll note here at the beginning, some of this information is in your reading, is in the online textbook, and some of it is not. You're responsible for all of it, but I will try and remember to flag the bit that definitely is not in the reading there. And as I say that, I'm flagging it. Okay. So Sigmund Freud, Freud was working at a time when most Europeans considered human behavior to be biologically fixed. Humans acted on instinct was the common idea. Just like animals act on instinct, so too did humans, they thought. So Freud agreed that biology did play an important role in social development, but not in terms of simple instincts. He said humans instead responded to two biological drives: the drive to survive. So this is what causes aggression or violence within human behavior, and the drive to procreate or reproduce. So this encompass any sexual needs within humans there. So human behavior as a result and human behavior and human personality development, Freud said, was driven by these two powerful drives. And Freud pictured socialization as this constant struggle between these two elements of our biology and the society in which a person was being raised. And Freud's model of personality, our socialization process is constant sort of struggle and conflict between trying to satisfy our drive to survive and then our drive to procreate. Now, this element now is not in Little, in the online textbook, but Freud also developed a model of personality that further represents and reflects this interaction of biology and society, and that interaction between basic drives and culture. And there are three components to his model of personality. And I'll go through each of the three and then tell you how they work together. So every personality, part of our personality, we all have an id component to our personality. The id represents those basic drives, which the drive to survive and procreate and reproduce. These drives are unconscious and demand immediate satisfaction. And in this way, the id operates on the pleasure principle, seeking immediate gratification in satisfying whatever the drive is, be it hunger, be it the drive to procreate, that sort of thing. So that's one element of the personality. Another element of our personality is the superego. The human personality develops a superego, and this is the operation of culture within the individual. With the emergence of the superego, a person can see why they can't always have what they want, why they can't always satisfy immediately any basic drive or need that they have. So the superego consists of cultural norms and values that set moral limits on a person. The superego emerges as children start to recognize parental control. And then it matures as they learn that their own behavior must reflect a broader system of cultural demands. The superego is also that voice, kind of like that we hear in our heads, telling us the right thing to do in a situation, or telling us what the consequences might be if we do something wrong or do something that we know we shouldn't be doing. Now, with the id and the superego at work, it could be really frustrating. The id wants to do whatever it wants pleasure, and it wants that, only that. The superego says, well, no, there's rules, we can get in trouble. It'd be really frustrating if that was all there was to who we are in our personality. So to avoid such frustration, a person has to learn to approach the world realistically, and this accomplishment forms the final component of the personality, which is the ego, which is the person's conscious efforts to balance the innate pleasure-seeking drives with the demands of the society. So the ego is the rational part of a person's personality that deals with the outside world, and it works to channel the id into socially acceptable activities. All right, and so I'm going to give you another way to kind of understand the connection between an example that sort of looks at how these all relate to each other, and maybe a way to kind of remember the difference between the id versus the ego versus the superego, because these are likely new terms, and it's hard to sort of separate them out. With these images I've included on the slide, hopefully, if you can remember the connection, superego is a parent sort of telling a child, what they shouldn't do. That's reflective of the superego. The referee is the one that kind of balances the id versus the ego or superego there. Here's another example. I'm going to go to the world of wrestling here. And I don't know, ever since I heard this example, it's just like, yeah, this helps, me keep separate what the id is versus the ego versus the superego. So you might want to picture like a wrestling match between two opponents, two wrestlers. You have Sid, id, the id aspect, Sid Vicious and Libido Kid. So they're the ones that, they're they need and they want to win this fight. They want to survive the match. They want to be the winner. They want that, that satisfaction, and they want it now. So we have this match between Sid Vicious and Libido Kid. In the stands are their mothers or fans, the super ego fans or super fans that are reminding them to be kind to each other, and to please stop fighting and to follow the rules, because fans will get mad if you break the rules, in a wrestling match, and they think that you should be disqualified. So the super fans are gonna, remind you to follow the rules. And then in the ring, you have the referee the ego, the last component, who's making sure the rules of the game are followed. They can still fight, but they must not cheat in this particular case. So if it works for you, great, but a fun little way to try and remember the difference between those. Okay, another theory we have here, a social psychological theory to explain elements of this socialization process, and more so that internalization of society, and that development of our own sense of self, our own identity. We have the work of George Herbert Mead, and Mead emphasized the power of socialization in our development, but highlighted inward thinking, which he contended was humanity's defining trait. Our ability to be introspective is what is unique and important about us as humans. So Mead's central concept is the concept of self-concept. Sorry, said concept too much. But others, it depends on the textbook. It's either self-concept or the sense of the self. This is that dimension of our personality, which is composed of self-awareness and self-image. The self is inseparable from society. It only comes into being through interactions with others and through social experiences. Social experiences are essential to, social experiences are essentially the exchange of symbols. When we interact with others, we use symbols. Using words, a wave of a hand, a smile, people are creating meaning, which is another distinctly human experience. So to understand the meaning of any interaction, we must imagine that interaction from the other person's point of view. What does that other person intend by waving at me? What does that person mean by saying, good day to you? So when we imaginatively place ourselves into that other person's perspective, we can then anticipate not only their intended meaning, but also we can anticipate how we are supposed to be and expected to respond and act in that situation. And this all involves that process of role taking. In addition to Mead, we have also the work here of Cooley, Charles Horton Cooley. Cooley developed the idea of the looking glass self to reflect this process as well. Looking glass, it's an older term, but a looking glass is essentially a mirror. But looking glass self sounds better than mirror self. In social life, other people represent the mirror or the looking glass in which we perceive ourselves. So the looking glass self is that image you have of yourself based on how you believe other people perceive you. So if you believe yourself to be smart, it's because you are thinking and imagine that's how other people see you. So let's take a look at how this plays out. The looking glass self, and I think I had the sort of the steps that one goes through in this looking glass self process here. But again, I like images here just as well. So it starts with how we imagine we see ourselves, and that is reflected by the Cooley called that the I. Sorry, my pen is here. There we go. So how we imagine ourselves is the I component. So I imagine, I am very smart. I'm a smart person. You wake up think of this as you waking up first thing in the morning, you're looking at yourself in the mirror. I am so smart. So then you go on to imagine how other people judge what they see and how we feel about those interactions. So wake up in the morning, you feel, I feel pretty smart. You go out into the world, you start to interact with other people, and those other people are referred to as the other. And they're going to reflect back to you either, yeah, you're smart, or whoa, you didn't take your smart pill today, by either things they say to you or their bodily, their gestures or their body language. And then you're going to reflect upon that. And you're going to reflect upon that, and that is either going to conform to your original thought that, yeah, I'm smart, and that's going to reinforce your impression of yourself, and reinforce, yeah, this is who I am. But particularly if the other in that image you see in the looking glass self is not the same as what you thought when you woke up in the morning, then you're going to have to do a reassessment of who you are with that information you got from the other, which you got from that looking glass self. And I have these arrows here. This process is always going on. Every single interaction that you have, you're constantly, interpreting what other people are saying to you, reflecting upon that, and then using that to inform your next actions, and then that sort of thing. And yeah, and so think of this also, particularly this other component and the looking glass self component here. Think of this, you wake up in the morning, you look in your bathroom mirror, and you say, wow, I am so stunning. I am so awesome looking. What would you need to see in the looking glass, in the mirror, when you're interacting with other people, so that your looking glass self feels great about being so stunning or good looking? What would you need to see them doing or saying or reacting that confirms that sense of yourself? Likewise, if they don't engage in that way, think about how then you sort of adjust your sense of, ooh, well, maybe today I'm not so stunning, or I need to really, think hard about this. Now, a very subtle and critical aspect of Cooley's looking glass self is that the self results from an individual's imagination about how others view themselves. As a result, we can develop self-identities based upon incorrect perceptions about how others see us. And often that is the case. Often people don't just overtly say, yeah, no, you're ugly, or you're so smart. People don't often just come out and say that. It's subtle things. It's gestures, it's body language, it's the absence of things. And so often we're wrong in interpreting and understanding what other people mean. So Mead's role-taking theory, I'm going to go back to this here. Mead's role-taking theory relies upon this looking glass self concept of Cooley's. It's that imagination implied in the looking glass self that helps us develop our own self and self-concept. And we gain a self-concept when we learn to take on that role and perspective of others. So going back to Mead here, and I had that, I just realized that there, and I should have addressed it here. I had on this slide here, this is where I combine both the looking glass self of Cooley and Mead's concepts. And I'll just clear that. And me, for instance, divided the self up into these three identities. And so this is how they align with the looking glass self. So the I is the doer, is the is one component of our identity. The other is that social aspect. It's that perception, that imagination of what others are saying of us, and then that then informs the me, and the me is the social aspect of our sense of self. And so that would be that, confirmation that, yeah, I'm so smart, or I'm so stunning. That's the social me that only came into being after the other reflected to us, or what we thought the other was reflecting to us in that interaction. I'll elaborate a little bit more on the me and the I and the other here in another example. And I know this is hard to do in an asynchronous course like this, but I always have lots of these examples and engagement that hopefully helps illustrate these concepts a little bit clearer. So I want you to do a little exercise to help illustrate the Mead's sense of self here. So I want you to take out your phone, or you can use if you have a camera on your computer, your laptop there, and I want you to take a picture of yourself. And I'm now going to answer a series of questions, and they're going to be admittedly obvious questions, but, and obviously I won't know your answer to it. So I'm going to tell you what I think you're going to answer to it, because the answers are in line with Mead's theory here. But it's hopefully a good way to help you remember the difference between Mead's, I, me, and other, generalized other here. So you've taken a picture of yourself. Okay, and now I'm going to ask you some questions. So the first question is, who is this a picture of? So the response, hopefully, will be, given the instructions, the response is me. This is a picture of me. Second question is, who took the picture? Again, it should be, if we follow the instructions, I took the picture. Last question, so what did you just do? Answer should be, I took a picture of myself. So in this particular example, an exchange here, I know artificial, but identifying the I in this particular case, I is the doer of the action, or the active phase of the self, according to Mead. It's the who took the picture. It's the who of who took the picture. And in this way, that it's the I that acts on or toward oneself. The me, in this case, is the self. The me is the one in regard to whom the I acted. You took a picture of yourself. I took a picture of me. And actually, I have another question here. How did your selfie turn out? How did the picture turn out? And then think about, how you even start to answer that question. What sorts of information might you be using to make a decision about how well that picture turned out, or whether or not you might share that selfie, that picture of yourself, with other people? The selfie that you took represents what others see. You're looking at your captured self-image, your me, and your attitudes towards your image, and the way that you regard your image is the generalized other in this sort of process here. It represents a generalized other, or as what Little describes, the common behavioral expectations of society. So whether or not you share your selfie, your picture, with other people, likely depends upon whether you think others are going to think it's a good picture, or an attractive picture, or a funny picture, or whatever you intended, which was meant to be a reflection of who you feel in terms of yourself in that particular sense there. Now, the self needs all of these components, where the I develops first, the me takes its form during 3 stages of development, according to Mead. And for that, we need to go to another slide here. So the me comes into form going through three stages, and you go through each of these in order. And it starts with the imitation stage. So infants at the imitation stage, infants usually, they are responding to others and interacting with others largely in terms of imitation. They mimic the behavior of others, of adults, for example, without understanding any of the underlying intentions or meanings behind that behavior. So I've got a picture here of a little child. I know it's older than an infant, but mimicking what dad is doing here in this particular case. So infants respond to others first only in terms of imitation. They don't understand the meaning of anything yet and their actions and what it means in the broader society. As children learn to use language and other symbols through play, the child then begins to develop an appreciation of the underlying intentions of other people's behavior, which is the start of learning to see the world through someone else's eyes. So through role playing, children will model themselves on key people in their lives who we call significant others. So a little child, dressing up is playing at being, other people, playing house, playing mommy or daddy, or playing superheroes, or playing princesses, or what have you. So this role playing helps children to imagine the world from the point of view of the other person. By pretending to be other people, children acquire vicarious experience of different perspectives. And an important aspect of this play stage is role taking, where the process of mentally assuming the perspective of another thereby enables them to respond from that imagined viewpoint of another person. Gradually, then, children learn to take on the role of several other people at the same time. And this is the game stage of the development, according to Mead. This skill is the key to moving from play involving one other person, so playing catch, for example, with one other person, to more complex games involving many other people. So team sports, for example, or even board games that you play with other people. Mead actually used the example of baseball, which maybe I should have used an example picture here, but Mead did use the specific example of baseball. To play baseball, a child has to be able to see the game not only from their own perspective, as say the pitcher, but they also have to understand and see the game from other players' points of view. That the player has to anticipate what the batter, the infielders, the outfielders are going to do and what to expect at them at different points in the game. And the baseball game, according to Mead, was more than just a metaphor. For children spend much of their playtime in organized games and organized activities, and largely through these games, they come to see themselves as part of an organized structure that has established roles and that is governed by general rules. Children's awareness of the structure that these roles and rules create gives structure to their internal lives too. Mead believed that children internalize this knowledge in the form of what he called the generalized other, which is an image of the structure, norms, and values of a whole. And this is why, you think of, or you likely know, various charities. I know it was at Canadian Tire and Mark's Workwear House. They're always asking for donations to their Right to Play, charity, which, gets money to be able to give access to sports for children across the country. This is why it's so important that we need to include more and more children into play, is because it's not only good physically for the individual, but it's an important socialization tool into, Canadian society in that particular way. So that's why I, not every time I go, because I go to Canadian Tire and Mark's a lot, but I do frequently donate to that. All right, so for this here, now there are other theories. I'll just remind you before I look at the slide here. So I have just gone through Mead and Freud and Cooley here. There are a couple of other theories that Little does talk about. They are important as well, and you will be tested on them as well. Again, I just didn't have anything different and or fun to add to them, so I'll just we'll leave that there. Okay, journal post questions. We have the ever-present question number 1, which is going back to the current issue or event you selected in journal 1, journal post 1, question 1, and see if you can find any concepts or theories or points from any of the information in this topic to help understand, a little bit more maybe what was going on in that issue or event, or even just inform some questions that you might ask of that event. And then question number 2, oh, we're not here yet. I have another video yet to go. Lost my notes, but we'll get to that one here. And oh no, I don't have any more notes on this, so I will address this here. So another thing I'm not covering that is well covered in your online text is agents of socialization. So in this socialization process and helping us, learn the culture, the society, but also giving us those experiences to develop that sense of who we are as individuals, are agents of socialization. Family is a key agent of socialization. Our peers, our friends are also an agent of socialization, educational system, and so on. So what I want you to do is I want you to choose one of those agents of socialization and explain how that agent has contributed to your own socialization. And with respect to the 2 key outcomes of socialization that I specifically addressed in the lecture video, the first video here. Little also talks about those, but there. And yeah, so that's all you need to do is just, tell me a little bit about what you now can sort of say about how certain agents of socialization have taught you things and taught you things about yourself.